How you guys doing today? Let's talk about Hinderer XM-18s for a little bit. Buckle up, this might get a little bit lengthy. I don't know. I didn't even write any notes. But what I want to talk about is Hinderer knives XM-18 because there's almost not a day that goes by where I don't get maybe a pricing question on a Hinderer XM-18 or a comment on one of my old videos talking about, hey, you said that they were running $600, $700, $800, but I see them all over the place now. You said that they were hard to get, but I see them all over the place. Times have changed, and I don't think Rick Hinderer ever, maybe in the beginning, but I don't think he was ever purposely locking up the market to make these knives hard to get. I had a couple of the hand ground ones when they were really hard to get, and from my understanding, he just wanted to make a hard use knife because he was making art knives before that as a firefighter. He just beat them up, so he made himself a hard use knife, and then all of his buddies were like, hey, I need one of those too, and then it just grew and grew from there. But what I really want to talk about, not so much pricing, okay? This is, there you go, Monday, December 7th, 2015 right now. These are pretty kind of easy to come by now. If you want an XM-18 today, I'm sure if you looked on the internet long enough, you'll find one for a pretty reasonable price, almost near table price. I believe the 3 inches come in around $425, something around there, and I feel they're worth every penny. I feel they're different from a Sebenza in a lot of ways. This is a small Sebenza, right? They come in a lot different flavors. Well, maybe I can't say that now with the Sebenza having the Tanto version, with Sebenza having, just for funsies, with Sebenza's having a little bit more choice offerings now. They've got the regular, they've got the Tanto. That's a lot of money on this table. You've got the StarTac. You've got the Insingo. You've got the larges. You've got 21s, 25s. I've got more 20. You've got the 25s. There's a lot of choices in Sebenzas now too, right? Another 25. So it's I don't know, that was fun to do. But there's a big difference here, I feel, and I want to explain to you the differences. Yes, I don't want to just compare the Hinderer to the Sebenza or the Hinderer to a SNG or a Hinderer, you know, I could keep going on and on, to there's another SNG. Let's just make a big old pile of knife, to a Grayman, do anything like that. I want to go over the construction and why I feel that Hinderer, after all these years, is still an awesome option, and why. Why is the construction considered hard use? What do they do different? Are they worth the $400? And understand, they're not that hard to get now, so like I'd already said, you don't have to spend $800 to try to get one. You might if you want to buy something old. This is an old-ish one. Still, I believe these are Generation 3 when you start going to mid-tech. You'll be able to tell that when he went full-on mid-tech with these, he started putting Hinderer up there. And maybe even some of his customs have Hinderer up there. I'm not that up-to-date on the custom Hinderers. But I know the original ones from way back, 2005, 2006's, somewhere around 10 years ago, somewhere like that. These were sterile up here, so, and they were usually hand ground. But why I say you might spend a little bit more than that, because this has no logo on it. This is the Duratec 20CV and factory non-flipper, which I don't know if they make. At one time I heard they were not making any more of those. And then I thought I just seen an option where somebody had one on a website for sale with no flipper. So I don't know. Maybe they seen how many mods a lot of people were doing to do no flippers. Decided to bring those back. I don't know. I think it's a good call if they did. But anyways, that's not covering what makes a Hinderer. Understand that they were one of the first in the market. Right there was Strider. I don't know who come first. G10 on the front, titanium on the back, which in theory gives you a little bit of extra grip versus something that's all titanium. Okay? Gives you a little bit extra grip and is also lighter. When you shrink them down into this size, a small Sabenza, it's not too much of a difference. But I can tell you there's a pretty big difference here between all titanium. This is a factory Hinderer titanium scale. They're not cheap. They're like $200. So this knife is heavier than this knife that has the liner with the G10 on it. So it does save weight. They were one of the first to do that right along with Strider. Again, I have no idea who came first, but... And then also, let's really get into, I want to take this knife apart, go over the build construction, because we've really been geeking out, or I've been geeking out on the channel, telling you guys about Lockup, and I can tell you all these are hitting just right on their locking interfaces. There's no blade play, no up and down wiggle. They're just solid. And I want to tell you why. So let's take one apart. We're going to go over construction. I've got a few here that I can show you together if need be. This is a Hinderer tool. Titanium. Very expensive now. I think these are almost $300 or so. For the titanium version. You can get the stainless ones for cheaper, and I also believe there's a couple other companies making these keychain, not this exact tool, but the breakdown tools. And truth be told, you don't even have to have a special tool. I just like using it because it's milled perfectly to fit in that pivot screw. There you go. So Hinderer, as far as I know, still makes all of his own hardware. So that's a huge thing. This is not just a chain ring bolt that was bought in bulk that's supposed to be on a bicycle. Know what I mean? There's none of that. So, he's getting very tight tolerances. And any of you guys who own a Hinderer XM-18, and if you've ever worked on one, you'll notice how nice and tight just even these screws are. There's no lash in these screws. You can't feel play in the screw. That's a very sturdy pivot. Very well done tolerances by Rick and his crew. So down to the hardware, there's a lot of details that a lot of people just don't see. Now they do ride on Teflon washers. Some people love it, some people don't like it, some people don't care. I like that they have not went to all bearing construction. I think for a working knife, a hard use knife that is meant to be in the dirt and the mud, I think bearings would be a terrible idea for this knife. I also feel that washers provide a little more side-to-side stability. That might just be in my head, and I might be overthinking it because there's plenty of hard-use knives nowadays that come with bearings. But I can just tell you from carrying the knife around in my shop and having blasting dust all around, and a lot of you guys work in jobs, you know, where dust is a problem and dust gets in your pockets and all that, it's going to slip inside the bearings and you're going to need a little more maintenance than you should. I think a hard use knife should be a well done, reliable tool, and I think that's exactly what they are. So now that we have this apart, what makes it hard use? What makes it maybe built a little better, built a little stronger than your average budget knife, your CRKT? Obviously this is not a frame lock, but this is a well done knife for the money. $30, made in China. These are all made in USA. You know, there's a huge difference, but anyways, check out how wide that these back, I'm just gonna pop most of them out. Again, keep in mind, all of this stuff is machined in Rick Hinderer's facilities. So even these screws, there's no play, there's no lash in them. I'm not trying to sell you a XM-18, but this is some of the stuff that if you're casually in the hobby, or you're trying to explain to your buddy or your wife why this knife costs $400, and I'm going to say that because he did up his production, which if there's more on the market, then the price is going to come down. I don't think it was ever his plan to lock up the supply to make the price go high. If it was, he would have just started selling them for the $700-800. He would have pocketed that profit. He didn't. He kept his price down where it was supposed to be, and the dealers in the secondhand market was going crazy, right? So I don't think it was no secret that he was trying to produce more knives. And he did that, and he produced more knives, and he put them in a lot more people's hands, and now it's up to you to decide how you want to use them. Do you just want to have them to, you know, look at in your safe, in your display, or do you just want to flick them, play with them, or do you really want to put them in your pocket and beat up on them? You know, but I'm telling you, as far as a user knife, they're awesome. I know a lot of people don't really give a lot of attention to the XM because it's kind of an older knife design by now. But I want you to notice how nice everything is milled. Again, if you guys remember the review on 2 that I have here, not perfect. He did slip a little right here on this lock bar, and you can see how that's not milled correctly in that corner. Doesn't affect the function of the knife, but for the price point that should be made right, and I'm sure if I sent this into Rick, he would make that right. So most of them are not like that, so that's an anomaly. It just, stuff happens. Tooling can wear down, and tolerances can get off, and stuff happens. Whatever. I'm not worried about it. And the owner's not worried about it. But anyways, so keeping in mind all this stuff is machined. Look how this is a 3-part fastening system. So this slides into here. I would like, if I had anything to complain about, I would say I'd like to see a D-shaped hole here with a D, you know, this to lock into the D part, D-shaped hardware, like we just seen. Maybe if you watch that video on this hardware in here is locked down by a D-shaped, because this can spin on you. This can spin when you're trying to take it out, and there's no way to fasten that back down. But it is what it is. It doesn't really take away from how great the knife is. Check out how wide that standoff is. And then check out that there's 3 of them. So this knife has 3 points that's locking it down. And it's also a 3-part system that's in here. So this knife really, when you're cranking on it and you want to pry with it, you really want to do some hard use. Not only, we'll get to the stop pin later, but just in the construction of these slabs and how they're held together, they're not going to skew this way. You really can't, because that's locked down so nice. And also, see how they're only locked down by the back? With this being wider, it's harder. You could almost run this over with a truck. I'm sure you could. And these handles are not going to fold together like this, where something like this cheapie over here, look how thin these standoffs are. something like that could. Now, it's not fair to put a $30 knife up against, you know, a $400 knife, but you get what I'm saying. It's better. So there's one way that I would consider them a little more overbuilt than your standard knife. Also, that they're a 3-part system, like you got this. Check out, this is the ZT450. Great knife in its own right, not knocking this knife. But look, this is screwed in right to the titanium. These standoffs are shouldered, but they are not nowhere near as wide and as stable and fat as this. There's only 2 points of retention there. You got, well, 3 really, because your pivot's there too. This, you got 3 and the pivot. So it's very, very strong locked down this way. Actually, there's a little more because there's a stop pin in there as well. But this also has a stop pin, so it's a moot point. But anyways, so we've gone over the back area and how that's locked down better and why I feel that's a better system too. Using a 3-part system that sandwiches together like this, also if you strip this somehow, the screw or this, whatever, it can be drilled out and replaced. Now you might not be able to do it, but Rick Hinderer can, and you won't have to replace your whole locking side. And then also keep in mind how tight these screws are machined. It's incredible. You don't see that. Not on most knives. But anyways, on with the show. We've just got done talking about lock face. He's got that all figured out a lot like a Sebenza. Now he's not locking up as deep generally. I'm sure you can find some that are locking up as deep. But as far as making full contact, all that's dialed on all his, on all his knives that I have seen. So good job there. I think you're getting your money's worth. Titanium all over this knife. You've got a really well done pocket clip. It's a very strong pocket clip, and it has give to it. But what I'm saying is I haven't ever bent one up and out, and I haven't bent one sideways. You know, it's just very well done. It's got enough lip on it to get up and over. Some of them have a little too much lip, but you know, that's just gonna happen. Also, if you guys watch any of my videos, I talk about this sometimes. Being that this is a hard use knife, what's done a little differently than what most knives, not most, about half are coming this way, but Rick Hinderer, I believe, really started this trend, and Strider, was this milled cutout on the outside of the lock bar. Again, I've already went over this a million times, so I'm not going to stress it too much. Just transfers this pressure, if you're trying to fold this, in a straighter line all the way down instead of getting kicked out and back in. So there you go. Also, just going over all of its features, not mentioning how thick this pivot is, right? Is throwing parts all around. Where was I going? How thick the pivot is, paired up with this great surface that's carbidized. Okay, see how it's a little slightly bumpy surface, which usually results in no stick. I don't really hear too much about XM18s having stick. And also with that hardish coating, I say hard-ish because I've never had it RC tested, you know, but the carbonizing actually should bring it up to quite a few points harder. But I believe he pretty much started that trend. I'm not sure. You'd have to research that. But so what I'm trying to do, he created the perfect storm here, in my opinion. He's got a strong pivot. He's got the perfect lock-in face here. I'd like to see this particular one going a little deeper, but it'll break in a little bit, I'm sure. But also he has a pressed through stop pin that is one solid piece here, and it's thick. And then it pairs up with the frame on both sides, and it's also rounded to distribute that pressure from there around in that little semicircle there. So not only is he putting the leverage point of the stop pin as far forward as possible, and then also locking it up as far all the way down as possible, right? So you have a lot of stability side to side because it's braced on both sides here, side to side. And also cutting this way, that you're not going to shear that stop pin. And then for the most part, even with his slicer grinds, he leaves a little bit of thickness up here. So that's full thickness around this pivot, around this section here. So even the slicers, yes, they are pretty thin up here. They're still a little thick, but very, very usable. Not overly thick. I mean, you probably wouldn't want to peel apples with it to make a pie, but anything else, I don't have a problem using my little slicer. Now the 3-inch, 3.5s, they can have a little bit thicker grinds on them. But again, this is a hard use knife. You're not really looking to slice cardboard. You can, but they're made for more than that, for much more abuse than that. So anyways, what I'm saying, they're very strong side to side. They got a great lockup. They're done on a great pivot. All of the hardware is machined with no lash in the screws for the most part. And you've got a separate stop pin. This is an older one. That stop pin's down here for closing. Since then has moved it up to here on the newer generations. You can also play with them. They're very customizable. You can get the brass standoffs, and he makes that available on his website. You can get different scales. You can play with anodizing on the parts. Are they perfect knives? No. No, they're not. Truth be told, they could flip a little bit better, but when they heard all that criticism, I believe they went the opposite direction. And I've seen a few Hinderers that have been absolutely insane. That detent actually falls down into the blade too much. And not this knife, but some of them, not even this one. This is actually really nice. Some of them fall down in there and the blade will actually catch. And it'll pull this lock bar up. So it's a little bit too hard and too tight. I still think his flippers are too sharp. That is one of the reasons this knife is in here. Why? If you're watching this, Rick and crew, why? Why would you want that? Maybe to catch, maybe I'm too much of a sissy. Maybe I'm too much of an everyday guy, I don't know. This doesn't hurt my finger, but why would you ever want a sharp flipper? Maybe it's to catch on the work gloves that they use, the big leather gloves, and maybe that's more important to him than us collectors and us compulsive knife players. And I can understand that if that's the case, but I would like to see that sharp flipper not be sharp. I've seen, this is not actually that bad, but when you pair that sharp flipper up with a too strong a detent to try to make it flip a little better, it's a bad situation. But anyways, thankfully none of these knives have that. This one did, but I got that fixed. But anyways, yeah, there's a lot you can do to them. I'm going to make a whole video on this separately, but we can check it out for now. But that's what I feel. We totally overlooked the lock bar stabilizer. This one does not have this one screwed in. I've got the parts over there, but with that disc that's screwed in, I don't even have one with the clip off to show you. Most people know this. You can't overextend this lock bar because it catches right there. And also, you can't squeeze this lock bar up and down this way because that bar is actually a stabilizer and catches. So you're not going to get any fatigue here on the frame, and it's not going to slip up and down on your lock, possibly slip and close on you, if that makes any sense. Which is different than most knives that you see with that type of system, because this, when it's locked up, doesn't clear that, and I can still push this up and down. It's hard to see, and it's really not that big of a deal, but this can flex this way because when it's closed it actually misses that titanium, where Hinderers actually is a stabilizer.
Is that a selling point? Is that a knock on these? Not at all. I mean, that's way, way, way overkill, but just another feature that they actually have. So all in all, I really, really love the Hinderer XM-18. Keep in mind that I don't really care for bearings in my work knives too much. I enjoy them. They're fun. I can carry them. But I really like not having to do much maintenance on my knives. And I just carry them and use them. And I do my maintenance whenever I absolutely need to usually. And that might sound terrible, but also you can get these parts pretty easily from Rick Hinderer's site. So I like the Teflon washers. It's one of the reasons they don't flip like a modern day flipper. Right? But you don't have the problem with the dust and the grime and the sand and stuff like that. Excuse me. I also really enjoy how he's always done a really nice chamfer all the way around. So there's no real hot spots. If they lock up a little too deep sometimes because of the way this choil is. This goes for almost any frame lock though. This corner can dig into your hand if you're really gripping the knife. I don't really feel it unless I go looking for it. Not so much on these little guys, especially when they're that early. Why would that matter? Because the farther this lock bar is pushed out, the less skin that can get in here and catch that corner. Or if this is real deep, then you might have a problem. And people say the same thing about the Sebenza. Sometimes that little corner right there be a slight bit of a hot spot if you're twisting in the right angle and pushing. But that's really looking for something to complain about. Yeah, frame locks for hard use. There's better systems. Do you have to spend $400 to get a great hard use knife? Absolutely not. Alright? You don't. This has a stronger lock. It does. Okay? Now, these are coming out in CTS XHP now. I still need to get one. This is the old AUS 8 version. But to me, you can't put this and this in the same category. But are you missing out on your life? If I made this Hinderer sound like the best thing that's ever been created, it's great. It really is. I feel it's worth the money, but don't feel like, you know, like you have to sell your kidney to go get one. Just start saving your money. And I think if you like the design, I think it's going to be pretty good fit for you. But until then, maybe grab you a cold steel and see, you know, if you really want to beat one up, not feel bad about it. Try a lock, you know. But again, not in the same category. But there are options now, especially with ZT pumping out a ton of great knives. Do I feel like this as hard use as these guys? No, not at all. I think in the category could be maybe Strider. Who's the stronger here? I have no idea. I'm not even going to tackle that question. You guys can fight amongst yourself in the comments if you wish. I think they're both strong knives, but if you notice, they both carry the same kind of build style. So you got a thicker pivot. You've got the press through here. I don't know if they manufacture their own hardware or not, or have it manufactured. I don't know. But you got titanium one side. You do get the titanium liner on this side, which actually does help to lock down the pivot. I do know sometimes Striders can get side to side wiggle because this G10 will wobble out a little over the years, and especially on these CC versions where it gets a little thin, where they have smoothed it over and gave it a little bit of a contour. But that's really nitpicking on the Strider too. But it happens. You know, I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't. Also on Striders, this is not a Strider video, but just know that they are not exactly the same on their stop pins. Hinderers always will contact both sides. Strider will sometimes, they'll contact on both sides, the G10 and the titanium. But sometimes they purposely grind them a little bit off on the G10 side, so they only lock up on the titanium side. And from what I understand, and on their website, I don't know if it's still up, many years ago, they said that this G10 is just going to smash down anyways and create a different lockup than when you had it. So they would rather remove that just a little bit, lock it up on the titanium, and then that way your lockup, your blade won't go higher, which would mess up your lockup even more. So there it is, 30 minutes. Just know that they are different. This stop pin is not quite the same as this. I think this is the better way to do everything. And you'll notice that this Sabenza is constructed a lot like that. I'll do another video too on why I feel the Sabenza is worth what it is and why it is what it is. So that's it, guys. Have a great day. See ya.